Please find a comfy position for meditation. As always, if you would, for anybody who is guiding a meditation, if you prefer to tune them out and do your own thing, then please do. I will offer some light guidance today in case you'd like to tune in. Connecting with the breath. With every exhale, settling a little more into the body. A little more into your seat. Finding some joy in this chance to practice well right here and right now. Maybe reflecting on how lucky we each are to come in contact with the Buddha's teachings in this lifetime. How lucky we are, not just that there is a way out of suffering, but that it is so beautifully articulated, so well preserved. Passed down from teacher to teacher to teacher to us. The Dhamma not being a stack of very thick books, but a flow of loving kindness and wisdom from open heart to open heart. If you are reflecting like I am, do you feel the gratitude in your body, the joy in your body? Is there an openness in your chest? Receiving the Dhamma, part of it is hearing with our thinking minds and understanding intellectually. I would say a larger part of it is having this openness in the heart, this receptivity, this humility, this openness to total transformation. Every time we come upon another insight, another episode of practicing well, we emerge a little bit transformed, a little bit more loving, more wise, more selfless. So let's practice having our hearts open to that version of ourselves that will be a little more transformed. Let's practice opening our hearts for the fully awakened version of us. It's fully possible for us to meet that fully awakened version of ourselves in this very life. It's possible that they're waiting to meet you. think there used to be a time when I was younger, or even in early adulthood, when I thought one day when I blank, everything will be okay. And the blank could be like one day when I meet the right person to be with as my life partner, or one day when I find the right job, or one day when, X, Y, and Z. It just kept going and going and going. And even when I found the right partner, then the goalposts would move. And even when I found the dream job, then the goalposts would move again, just further and further and further into the distance. And finally, after practicing well, I realized that that is just a load of baloney, and that everything in the conventional world, every single thing, has an upside and a downside. And when I reflect on this, then it makes it so much easier to, first of all, let go of attachments, because then we realize all the things that I was dreaming about, like they all have their downside too. And it also makes it so much easier to just enjoy and sink and settle into the present moment, because wherever I am, there's an upside. And even if I don't see it yet, it's only because I don't understand it yet. But it's there. And wisdom invites us to look more closely at the present moment so that we can see that upside. And it also makes it much easier to make decisions. I think a lot of times people think that there's only an upside to something like getting a prestigious job or having a baby or something. But to every major upside, there's also lots of downsides. So when we see those factors clearly, it can help us make a lot of more skillful decisions. It can also help us curate those decisions so they match our own needs and own interests better. But okay, let's talk about it. Let's unpack all of this. Okay. So there is there are downsides to every upside. And I used to think that there were a lot of things that only had upsides. So um, it, an example that comes to mind immediately is in my early 20s, I spent 6 months just traveling around the world on a shoestring budget. So including plane fare, I think I spent $30 or $35 a day. And if you take out plane fare, I think it was like $15 a day. I spent traveling around the world for 6 months. And I remember for the last leg of my trip, I spent a month in Alaska working as an assistant at a kayak camp. And it was a really beautiful, remote area of Alaska. So remote that it was only accessible by water taxi, like a 40-ish minute water taxi ride from the port out to an island. And I remember stepping off the water taxi onto the beach of this island, and just it was so gorgeous that I felt like my eyes were watering from how beautiful it was. Just the mountains that were capped with snow. It was this really small bay with a house nestled at the inside of the bay. So it was just these rocky beaches, beautiful hillsides. Three eagles lived in a nest right there. So they were always circling and making themselves known. There were sea otters, there were porpoises. And I stepped off the water taxi and I thought, I will never, ever, ever get sick of this view. And I bet you can guess what happened. After a few days, definitely a couple weeks, I got so homesick and so just tired of the manual labor, and as lovely as the hosts were and as rich of an experience as it was to kayak around the sea almost every day, I also got incredibly sick of everything. I got so sick of being trapped there. Like there was nowhere we could go, really. There was very little human interaction outside of the people who ran the camp. The tourists who came were sometimes very annoying and demanding. I got so homesick that at one point I remember just being so excited to go home so there would be sidewalks again. I was like, oh, I just can't wait to see a sidewalk. I can't wait to walk on the sidewalk again. And yeah, the view just became, even the beautiful, gorgeous scenery became annoying. And it was like that with every beautiful view. It was something that a lot of American expats, like Western tourists, would talk about when we collected at hostels together, is like there's no perfect beach, there's no perfect view. Even the picture perfect beach that you imagine when you see a postcard, like fine white sand, sunny skies, just a slight breeze, just waving the palm trees, that can only exist for a split second. And then the breeze dies, and then mosquitoes come out and eat you alive. And it's like so dreadfully sweaty. And the coconut water, the coconuts are overpriced for the tourists at the beach. And it just doesn't end. And there is a downside to even the picture perfect postcard. And I saw this again and again and again. Um, I remember there was a job that I was so excited to interview for, and I was telling my partner, like, I think if I get this job, then everything would be all set. And it, they, it reads really good on paper. It's like people doing a lot of good in ways that sound very exciting and glamorous, and like it's really going to change the world for a really prestigious institution that has a really amazing reputation around the world. But I bet you can guess what happened when I got the job. It was perfect for about 2 weeks. And then this is what happens when you peek behind the curtain. And especially with prestigious institutions, like the more prestigious the institution, the more they feel free to just crap on the people who work for them because there's so much attraction to the name and the prestige that people just feel free to be really rude to each other. And not just at the institution where I worked, but I have a friend who worked at Disney, and it was the same thing. People dream all their lives to animate for Disney or to work and make visuals for Disney. And when it actually happens, they get abused because there's so much desire to stay there because it's their childhood lifelong dream that they get completely taken advantage of. Like inhumane hours, sleeping in cots at the workplace, not going home for just too many days at a time because they have to work to fulfill their lifelong dream. And at the institution where I worked too, just seeing how much of the work was actually about egos battling, people trying to get other collaborators to bend to their will, making sure that everything appeared really shiny and polished on the surface, but under the surface, all that clashing of ego just was even actively hurting the very population that they were professing to serve. And of course, not just jobs, but and, even in the downside, like that's where the whole be like dirt incident happened too. So, it appeared like all upside on the surface, and then under the surface there was a lot of downside, and then under the downside there was a really beautiful chance to practice. So there was also an upside under the downside. But also in relationships, right? Like I I love my relationship with Kyle, and it's so strong and warm and trusting and all these beautiful things. And it is only that way because our relationship has gone through so many tests and there's been so much hardship. And so far, at least, we just keep proving that we'll put our relationship first and put our love first. So the strength only exists because of all the challenges we've endured. And I always want to say this too, like definitely nothing abusive, nothing where it's just the challenges that come with life, the changes that happen in life, and all the obstacles and challenges that come with life, and always just showing each other that we're going to prioritize our love first. But yeah, that security is only possible because of how tested it has been. And to the point where I've told Kyle straight up, like, when we part, whether by death or by choice, I never, ever, ever want to be in this kind of one-on-one relationship ever again because it's like I'm so glad that I did it and I'm so glad that we're doing this together. But I think I only did it because I never knew how hard it was. And it's kind of like how sometimes like the CEOs of successful companies, they'll in interviews they'll say like, wow, like I didn't know how hard it was to start a business until I actually did it. And I'm glad I didn't know because if I knew, then I wouldn't have done it. It's with that energy of like, I'm really glad I did it. And I did it because I had no idea how hard it is. Yes, so those are some examples. Everything in conventional reality, even even awakening, like awakening itself, pure consciousness itself is flawless because there is nothing to be flawed. It's pure consciousness itself is pure. It's absolutely, it's all these superlatives. But the human perception and experience of full awakening also has its difficulties, right? So for the person who has experienced full awakening, they still experience discomfort in their everyday life and unpleasant feelings in their everyday life. So for a practitioner, and I definitely thought this too earlier on in my practice, I thought, one day when a practitioner is fully awakened, then they will have only bliss in their lives. And that is just haha, a lot of baloney. There continues to be difficult feelings, unpleasant feelings. It's only that the practitioner becomes so fluent in practicing well with those difficult feelings that they see through those difficult feelings and understand that they are smoke and mirrors made of soap bubbles. And even for the people around that practitioner who is fully awakened, there can be obstacles and downsides. I think a lot of times, when we read the suttas, it's like this person talked to the Buddha and then they became fully awakened. And that's also not the full story. Like it is the truth. It is the story. But I think sometimes, from the stories I've heard, that when someone makes it all the way, the people who are closest to them sometimes experience, even as they celebrate, that is such an amazing thing and it's so inspiring and motivating in their practice. The people who are sometimes closest to that practitioner who has gone all the way sometimes also experience difficult feelings and the sense of being left behind. And Ajahn Mun's biography describes this with a deva who, from the writing of it, it kind of seemed like maybe they were partners, like spouses in previous lifetimes. And this deva came to Ajahn Mun and was like, "Oh, you went all the way without me?" And he had to teach her. I love the way he put it, actually. He said, of course, one of us had to make it across the finish line first. It's like when two people are eating a meal together and one person is going to get full first. But then, you know, what happens after that is whoever made it first will turn around and help their closest loved ones across the finish line. And he so beautifully taught that deva that the deva was, I think, reborn to her next life and went back into the practice and it seemed like she wasn't so mad at him anymore. And sometimes for other people, like when someone has made it all the way, or even when someone's just practicing really well, there can be a lot of feelings of jealousy, insecurity. Yeah, so even that ultimate upside, even that has downsides in conventional reality. And I say this as an invitation to everybody who hears this to stop looking over to the other side of the fence and saying the grass is greener, much greener over there. I'd rather be over there, and rather to enjoy wherever we are right now. Wherever we are, there's a chance to practice, whether things are pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Of course, if things are unpleasant, maybe the opportunity to practice is richer. But even if things are pleasant, I've felt like at times, like, and I still feel this. I see this all the time, where a breakthrough can happen after I've had a period of a lot of restedness and metta and just pleasant feeling. And it's like it's charging up my battery so I can dive deep into suffering and the ugly truth of the way things are after that. So it's all valuable, it's all beautiful. And then, of course, there are upsides to every downside. All the things that we as humans think are the most despicable and awful and disgusting, there are upsides there too. I heard a story from a monk who was practicing somewhere in Southeast Asia at a time of war. And apologies, I don't remember exactly which monk or which country, so I'll have to keep the details vague. But there was a monk who was practicing in Southeast Asia at a time of a lot of war, a lot of violence, just death everywhere. And he said that, a lot of times in Western or like places of practice where there's just more abundance and more comfort and luxury, spiritual practice is seen as like the cherry on top of one's life. It's like extra credit, you know. But in that place and time of extreme violence and war and death, man, where was the meditation hall or the sala of that monastery or temple packed full? And when it came time for people to chant the precepts or whatever the chant was that night, it was like they were blowing the roof off the place. And practice was not seen as the cherry on top, but as the buoy on which people were holding on to make sense of the chaos that is the reality of the world. So there was a lot of sincere and dedicated practice in the middle of all that downside. There was that upside. And even having survived traumatic events before, in the middle of it, when nothing made sense, having survived a traumatic event in my 19, 20 years, when I was 19 or 20, there was like a year and a half when I was just depressed and everything felt gray and murky and colorless. And I was going through life day by day because I had no reason not to, but I had a really might as well attitude about everything. Like, why go to school? Well, might as well. And that was the only way I could go through life day by day for about a year and a half after going through some traumatic event. And I remember coming out of it after that time. And what happened was my parents gave me a camera, and I remember taking pictures and just remembering how good it felt to be alive again. Like this joy that I was experiencing again, finally, through making art and connecting with other people through photography, getting excited about life again because who knew where this camera could take me? Like, just, I felt like the color was just seeping suddenly back into my world, into my life. And I remember after coming out of it, and I'm definitely going easy on actually how bad it was because it was pretty bad. That year and a half of depression after that traumatic event. Uh, but after coming out of it, I remember looking back and thinking, wow, even out of such darkness, I can find a way out. And just this feeling of knowing that from here on out, no matter how bad things got, there would be an end to that darkness, even if it stretched on for a long time. For me, it was, for that time, it was a year and a half. But even if it stretched on for, and it felt endless at the time, but then after having come out, I looked back and realized that it's not endless and that there could be a way out. That was such an enormous upside to that downside. And all the things I learned along the way, I feel like after going through that period, I learned so much about the truth that there are lots of people out there that do not lead their lives based on goodness. And I felt like I was able to see people so much more clearly, the upsides to people and the downsides to people, the ways that they were beautiful and the ways they were unbeautiful, like the Buddha would say. And that was such an enormous gift as well. Even, even, and this was part of what was so traumatic about it. Like, even the people in the world who I grew up thinking that they were always going to be there to help me, I think I was more traumatized by the police detective who was assigned to my case than the actual person who did the traumatic thing to me. Um, I think I was more hurt by something my father said after the what happened than maybe what actually happened itself. Yeah, just seeing people clearly, like even the people who we are conditioned to think are just there to help us, the heroes of our everyday life, even they can really devastate us and disappoint us. And so to cast aside these labels that I grew up with and to really see people for who they are and what they do, that was a lot of valuable lessons learned. In every single instance of grief that I've ever experienced has taught me so much that I would never ever take back. I would gladly, it was it was like the pain of experiencing that grief was the cost of learning the wisdom after just holding that grief lightly, feeling the feeling in my body no matter how painful it was, and just letting it pass through the system. And it is a price that I'm so glad that I paid. I remember after, at a time when all Kyle and I wanted was to have a biological baby and we had a miscarriage, the grief that almost consumed me after that was so immense. It was like a tidal wave at the height of a skyscraper that just crashed down on me. But there was a day, like right after it happened, when Kyle was like, we got to get out of the house. Like, we're just getting smothered by our grief here at home. So we went on a little kayak trip, and it was this really beautiful area of Santa Cruz, Elkhorn Slough, one of the highest rated kayaking spots in the world for any Bay Area locals who want to do something on their July 4th weekend, maybe. But we went there, and there was so much life all around us. And it was so adorable and cute and beautiful to see, like sea otters who were like floating around with linked arms or wrestling in the waters, like picking mussels and clams and oysters off of each other, cracking it on their ribs, just somersaulting in the water. Like so many different species of birds walking along the sand or dive bombing the waters for fish, a whole sea of jellyfish that passed right under our boats. It was so much life. And I remember sitting there watching all this life all around me and realizing that wherever there is life, there is death. And the sea otters are only there because they are eating the shellfish. The gorgeous birds are only there because they're dive bombing for fish and killing the fish. And that there's absolutely nothing personal about what we just went through because wherever there is life, there is death. And I just remember like this grief that I was holding on to so much and just couldn't understand, couldn't let it pass through my system. I remember sitting in that boat, in that kayak, and seeing the truth of the way things are. And then finally, this relaxing, this relief. And really facing that truth to me is fully worth all of the pain it took to see that truth. An upside to every downside. So when we see the upsides and downsides clearly, or as clearly as we can, because it's also impossible to know everything about something until you actually experience it, then you'll know what it's like. But when we see the upsides and downsides more and more clearly, and maybe get some perspective from other people who might have gone through the same thing or see different sides of the situation, then we can work with that situation the most skillfully and wisely. We can weigh the upsides and the downsides. And something I really enjoy is when you see the upsides of a situation, but then when you look at the downsides of it, there are some things that can be tweaked so that there are more and more upsides and less downsides. That is very fun for me. That is a fun game for me to play. So I'll give an example. So for the past few months, I was offering this monthly Dhamma talk Zoom meeting, and there were a lot of upsides. Like I love Dhamma time at any time, really. And connecting with the people on that meeting was really joyful. And I think so fondly of the people who showed up. And there were also downsides, like I don't love giving a Dhamma talk at night. It takes a lot of energy for me. Um, and also like as much as I love connecting with the people who show up, like the cost of having a scheduled event at night and having it go till like 8:30, it, it it's a little taxing for me. And so it takes a lot of energy for me to show up. And I think maybe because it was a Monday night or for whatever reason, the energy was just a little bit low on the Zoom meetings, a little bit sleepy, which I can totally understand on a Monday night. But there was this discrepancy between the energy it took for me to offer it and the energy that was coming back. So I was actually, when the Ayas and I were at Cloud Mountain, when we were driving up, I was like, oh, like I'm toying with the idea of just stopping the offering. And the Ayas gave me the perspective on the situation that I was not seeing, which was that people were giving them a lot of positive feedback. And apparently there are some people watching in Minnesota. So hello, Minnesota friends. Excited to meet you one day, I hope. But they were like, they gave me the visibility into all the upsides that I was not seeing. So then I was like, okay, well, it seems like there's actually a lot more upside than I thought to giving this offering. But there's still that downside of like, I don't love giving Dhamma talks at night. it takes a little more energy than the energy I'm getting back in that moment. So, what if I just offer videos asynchronously? That way, it's still reaching the people who are practicing well from it. And then it eliminates the downside of me not loving to give Dhamma talks at night. So then I think it works out really well for everybody. There's just more and more upside and no downside as far as I'm concerned. So that's an example of when we see the upsides and downsides more clearly, then we can actually do a lot to make ourselves happier. Yeah, and then I think sometimes when I say the stuff like how to just work skillfully within conventional reality, I get the feedback that like, oh, but why don't we just witness and observe and see that even when there's a lot of downside, it's like this. Like Ajahn Sumedho says all the time, right? Like it's like this. There's downside, and yes, we can absolutely do that, and we can also do what's going to be make us happy and free on a practical conventional side as well. Because practice is this balance of letting and letting go, a balance of diligence and also observing the way things are, no matter how pleasant or unpleasant. So, my personal policy is always do the best you can to make the situation more pleasant and less harmful. And all the way as you go, like even as you make the decisions and make things better, also practice observing it and just stepping back and knowing it's like this. And also, there's going to be a point in time when you can do nothing else to make the situation more pleasant for yourself. And when you hit that wall, then that is where some really beautiful breakthrough can happen when we step back and observe and know it's like this, and new depths of equanimity and wisdom that we can receive. So I think practice is not fully a passive process and not fully an active process, but more it's about being passively active and actively passive at the same time. Oh, and then, there are some situations where there's a lot of upside and a lot of downside at the same time. And in those situations, then I think skillful practice means going step by step. And this was something that was very hard for me to learn because in this lifetime, I have so much conditioning to go 20 steps at a time or 100 steps at a time. But it's been really skillful and rich practice for me to just go one step at a time and evaluate things as I go, letting the situation unravel or develop organically. And with each step, seeing more and more clearly what are the upsides and what are the downsides, and responding in the present moment. So, for example, Kyle and I are exploring with the idea of fostering a child. Definitely not a baby, but we're toying with the idea of fostering a child. And there are lots and lots and lots of potential upsides to this, and also lots and lots and lots of potential downsides to this. So we're just taking things so slowly. It's like we start at the beginning and we fill out the first round of paperwork, and then we talk about, okay, do we want to go further? Do we want to take one more step? Yes. Okay. Schedule our first home visit. Okay. Do we still want to explore more? Do we want to go one step further? Okay. Fill out the second round of paperwork. Okay. Do we want to go further? Yes. Okay. Now go to the orientation and just one step at a time. Practicing patience. Lots of patience. Yeah, everything all around us, upsides and downsides to all of it. And when we see it that clearly, then we can really make the decisions that are truly the most beneficial for ourselves and for our practice. Practice the richest all along the way, and more, put down our attachments all the way to Nibbana. All right, may we practice well as always. And if anybody has anything they would like to say, I would love to hear it. Ling.
Hi, Grace. Thank you so much for your beautiful talk. I always feel it's very speaking to the heart. Your stories, I can resonate a lot every time when you speak. Very authentic. Thank you. And yeah, many things you talked about it, I can really resonate. You know, like when I was young, I thought that this is the best things, but it turned out not quite exactly what I was looking for. And but I totally experienced, and even though it was kind of disaster, but somehow there was kind of disguised blessing when I didn't give up. And sometimes I was asking myself, do I, really regret what I have done? And there was a suffering, but there's also fruits. And yeah, I don't really have question. I just thought love was so beautiful. Every time I come here, listen to your talk, I can kind of resonate my own personal experience. So thank you very much.
Yay! And that sounds like really beautiful, rich practice to me, Ling. Yay! Yeah, I remember at work, like even when I would just try doing something, or, one time I got assigned, and this is not a direct response to you, Ling, this is just something that came up while you were speaking. But one time I got assigned a direct report to manage who was like notoriously difficult to work with. And I just figured, okay, I'm just going to try my best. I'm going to do my absolute best to be a good manager to this person. And it went awfully. It went terrible. I had to fire this person, and they sure screamed a lot of insults at me on the way out. But I remember even when that was happening, there was this part of my mind that was like, okay, so this is the truth. Like this is the truth of the way everything worked out. This is the truth of the way this person is responding at the time. This is the truth of what it feels like to fire somebody and to get a lot of insults screamed at me. And I was so happy to see the truth, even when things didn't work out the way that anyone had hoped. And that instance, by the way, is one of my favorite examples of how sila, keeping really good sila, can protect us when we're in uncomfortable situations and when people are screaming awful things at us that are untrue and very public with people listening all around. um, is when, because I knew that I had done my absolute best by this person and that everything that they were screaming at me was not true, it was like I was looking around during that call and I was like, who's he screaming at? He's saying grace, but what is happening? Like everything just bounced off of me, and there was 0% anxiety that anybody who also heard this would believe him. So, yes, Sila can keep us so safe in so many ways. All right. Any more questions, comments, or anything? Going once, going twice. All right. I hope you all have a beautiful weekend, and I know you all are already practicing so well, but I'm going to say it anyway. May we all practice well. I'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.